Once while I was discussing things with my seminary professor, he told me something that startled me. He says the seminary can only train you up to so much, and then it is up to you to use your training and apply it to the different events that you come across, the different challenges that you face in ministry. I'm sure, my dear brothers and sisters, each one of us also experiences something similar. In every situation in life, we often want to ask ourselves, what is it that God expects of me in this situation? What is God's will for me in this mode of life? In the ups and downs I face, in the struggles that I face, at my workplace, in my family, in my church, in my community, what is God's will for me? Well, the answer can be rather complicated and yet extremely simple. We have the case of Jeremiah in today's first reading, who tells us about Yahweh's call. Yahweh is calling him to be his prophet, to be his mouthpiece, and to be the conscience of Israel. Well, Jeremiah went through a lot of struggle, but Yahweh had already warned him what his will was for him. Reflecting on decades of being Yahweh's mouthpiece and the conscience of Israel, Jeremiah tells us of his call and how Yahweh had called him, how he had consecrated him even from his mother's womb, and then promised him one thing, that he will undergo persecution of every kind. Every kind of attempt will be made to dissuade him, to move him away. And yet, Yahweh also reassured him that in all these things, do not worry, I am with you. What a beautiful thing for Yahweh to tell Jeremiah, while he brings out the reality of every situation that Jeremiah will face. He also promises that in all these things, he will be with Jeremiah. We look at the gospel of today. Just last Sunday, Jesus opens the scroll of the prophet Isaiah and reads out, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has sent me to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to the captives," so on. And now today, we find Jesus being confronted by the crowd. They want to throw him out of the synagogue, and in fact, they want to throw him off the cliff on which their town was built. And yet we are told Jesus escapes from their midst. God protects him. What is God's will for us in my life? This is a question that has always been asked by all generations. All generations who want to serve God, all generations who look up to God for guidance. St. Paul, my dear brothers and sisters, writing to the early church, to the Christians of Corinth, has just spoken about the many gifts. And today he tells us that all these gifts can be operational, but all these gifts must be operated in the context of love. Using himself as an example, he says, I may have all the gifts of prophecy, I may have the gifts of tongue, I may have the gifts of healing, but if I do not have love, I am a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. And then he goes on to tell us what he means by love. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous, love is not boastful, love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in everything that is right. What is St. Paul telling us, my dear brothers and sisters? Basically this, that in life, there is no blueprint that God gives us of his will, but he tells us exactly how to understand his will. He blesses each one of us with talents, with gifts, with abilities. And each one of us is called to use these talents, these abilities in the context of love. And so perhaps when we ask ourselves, what is God's will for me? I think very easily we can look up to today's second reading, where Paul gives us the qualities of love. And to ask ourselves, in whatever we say and in whatever we do we exhibit these qualities of love? Do we exhibit love in action as being patient, kind, not jealous, not boastful. In very simple words, my dear brothers and sisters, as St. Augustine put it, love and do what you want, because if you truly love, you cannot do anything wrong. If you truly love, you can never really sin. If you truly love, God remains at the center of your life. What is God's will for you? What is God's will for me? To do everything that He expects us to do everything and to use everything at our disposal, but always in the context of love. If whatever we do brings about love, joy, peace, kindness, you can be sure that you and I are doing God's will. All that we need is love, because God is love.